Now, let me ask you this question. How many of you are like me in that if you pulled out your phone right now and you went to the picture thing on there where all your pictures are stored, you would have approximately 92 million photos, give or take? Okay, yeah, all right. I did that last night, just kind of curiosity. I was like, man, that's like, it's so overwhelming. You're going, why did I take a picture of some of those things? Like, literally, I have a picture of a burrito. But at some point I thought, man, I could use this. So I took a picture. Anyway, it's overwhelming. Like, it's just tons of photos out there. But I'll be honest with you, I think it was about a year ago when it came out, Apple got me. Like, they got me. They got me so good, I did not even see it coming. They released some new update, I think it was about a year ago, where Apple, they put together like a slideshow of your pictures for you. I don't know if you know this feature on there, but they'll put together a slideshow of like a certain place you were at or a certain face it recognizes, and then it puts like this pretty piano instrumental music to it, and I'm watching it fighting back tears. I'm like, how does Apple know? Like, and it's one of those deals, and you may not know that your phone has that capability. Wait till after this sermon, please, to mess with that. But so last night I went to it again, and we're in the bedroom, and I'm on a little couch in a bedroom. Brianna's sitting on the bed. She's doing something on the computer. And I'm over there, and she sees me like fighting back tears. And she goes, what is going on? And I turn around and go, babe, it's a slideshow of you. And she goes, you're so weird. I was like, I know, but you're so pretty. Like, I was like, but here's the thing. Apple knows, and just after the last service, a guy goes, Android has the same thing too. So like, all right, back off, Android people. Jeez. But they know that the truth about you and me, that you and I, we run life at like 100 miles an hour really, really fast. Like, memories come, memories go, 90 million pictures on our phone, but we don't really remember them. And Apple or Android, they've got this technology to go, hey, listen, here's a minute or 2 minutes of some memories, right? You're at this place, or you're at this event, or this face it recognizes, and it puts music to it, because it knows that you and I, we have millions of pictures, but those memories, they become very fuzzy and very distant. And so it takes together, makes a nice slideshow, say, hey, remember this. And so you get to go back and remember that moment. And I think the same is true when it comes to life change in your life and in mine. We're finishing up this series called More Life Change, which is really our heartbeat of our church to see Jesus change lives. Whether it's your life or your marriage or overcoming an addiction or you being a part of somebody else's life change, we love that. But all too often when life change happens in our life, it's awesome, it's unbelievable, it's literally life-changing, but it just comes and it goes. It was great at that moment, but I'm on to the next thing. I'm running life at 100 miles an hour. I've got another thing, another tension, another sickness, another unexpected bill, another relationship issue, another thing at work. I've got another thing. As great as this life change was, he restored my marriage. I got baptized, overcame that addiction. I'm debt-free. My family is stronger, better than ever because of this. Then God, rescued me, restored me, healed me. Now I'm better. As great as that was, I tend to forget it because I'm busy going on to the next thing. And it's so important that you and I, we remember those life-changing moments in our life. And so we're going to talk about, as we finish up our series today, remembering and really reflecting on those life-changing things that happen, those unbelievable, wow, inspiring things that happen that are so easy to forget because we're moving on to the next thing. And what's interesting, in John chapter 16, Jesus would say this. He goes, in this world, you will have trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. And what's interesting is he says trials, sorrows, plural. Doesn't go singular. Doesn't go, hey, listen, in this world, you're going to have a trial and a sorrow, and then after that, it's clear sailing. Or you're good to go, right? One trial, one sorrow. No, it's trials and sorrows. That is life. And so you have this life-changing moment, and God moves, but man, there is another trial or another sorrow or another uphill battle or another tension or something else that you have to walk through. That is life. You're going at it 100 miles an hour. That life-changing moment that happened 3 months, 6 months, 3 years ago was great, but it loses focus and it becomes a fuzzy memory because, man, I'm on to the next thing. And so it's so important that we remember those moments, those life changes. So we're going to look at today just a super practical way that you can remember that life change that has happened in your life. Overcoming an addiction, a marriage restored, finances getting back in shape, healing, something in your life that has changed, baptism, practical way to do it, and then really why it is so important that you and I remember it. If you got a Bible, I need you to grab it. I need you to go to Joshua chapter 4. Joshua chapter 4. If you don't have a Bible, it'll be up on the screen. Joshua chapter 4. While you're turning there, let me tell you what has happened, because in Joshua chapter 4, this is a 40-year moment in the making. 40 years. It's a 40-year promise that God made good on here in this moment, and the children of Israel have entered into the promised land. They have crossed through the Jordan River, and they are now there in the promised land, something that they had been waiting for and wandering through for 40 years. 40 years earlier, they were slaves in Egypt, and with Moses' leadership, he leads them out across the Red Sea, and they wander in the desert for 40 years. Moses dies. Joshua, his right-hand man, becomes his successor, becomes the leader. He leads them across the Jordan River, and they are now in the promised land. Now, in chapter 6 and beyond, they've got the Battle of Jericho and other battles and wars that they must fight once they enter into the promised land. But here in this moment, there is a 40-year moment in the making. They've crossed over. Before they go to the next battle, before they go to the next fight, they do something to remember. They do something to never forget this moment, because it is a life-changing moment for them. Joshua chapter 4, we'll pick it up in verse 4. Here's what it says. It says, "So Joshua called together the 12 men he had chosen, one from each of the tribes of Israel. He told them, 'Go into the middle of the Jordan in front of the ark of the Lord your God. Each of you must pick up one stone and carry it out on your shoulder. 12 stones in all, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. We will use these stones to build a memorial. And in the future, your children will ask you, what do these stones mean? Then you can tell them, they remind us that the Jordan River stopped flowing when the ark of the Lord's covenant went across. These stones will stand as a memorial among the people of Israel forever.' So the men did as Joshua had commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan River, one for each tribe, just as the Lord had told Joshua. They carried them to the place where they camped for the night and constructed the memorial there." Now, you've read this before, and so if you've grown up in church, you've certainly heard this. It's easy to get that going, yeah, they got some stones and, built a little memorial there. You need to understand that, notice that they carried them on their shoulder. So it wasn't like a little rock. I mean, if you get a little rock, you're not carrying it on your shoulder. It's not like a little pebble. These are stones with some girth. They're big enough to make a memorial. And he goes, you need to go into the river, pick them out, and carry them to where you're going to camp. So just imagine this, right? So they go in there and they pick up a stone. They pick up a rock. This thing right here. Now, earlier, one of the media guys, he goes, "I thought that stone was styrofoam." I was like, "You're fired." So anyway, that is not. I stole that from our waterfall out there. Anyway, seriously. So go in there. And so they go in there and they pick up this rock, right? And they're going, okay, we're going to carry it for Joshua. And they put it on their shoulder. And Joshua goes, great, you need to carry it to where we're going to camp to. That's fine. Where are we going to camp? Look at where they camp. Look at verse 19. It says, the people crossed the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month. Then they camped at Gilgal, just east of Jericho. They camped at Gilgal. You need to know something. Gilgal is not right there on the shores of the Jordan River. It's about 5 miles inland. So he goes in there and goes, hey, go get a rock. And goes, oh, okay, got it, put it on your shoulder, got it, carry it to where we're going to camp. You got it, Joshua, where are we camping? About 5 miles away. Did he say 5 miles? I think 5 miles. Now, you put this on your shoulder. I could carry this rock maybe 50 yards. They're carrying it 5 miles. You have to know that this was one memorable hike. This wasn't just, hey, pick up a rock and put it like next to the Jordan River and we'll build it there. It's like, no, pick it up and walk with it 5 miles. And so they walk with it 5 miles. They put it there. And I want you to look at verse 21 because this is verse 20. Verse 20. It was there at Gilgal that Joshua piled up the 12 stones taken from the Jordan River. Joshua himself personally built the memorial. So the 12 guys, they bring the stones there and drop them there. And then it was Joshua himself who began to build the memorial. Stone by stone by stone as it went bigger and bigger and bigger. 12 stones in all. And so here's what I want you to grasp just from this little bitty story, and it's simply this, is to do something memorable to remember the life change. Do something memorable to remember the life-changing moment that happened in your life. It wasn't like, hey, pick up a rock and put it next to you. It's like, hey, pick up a rock, carry it 5 miles, and then Joshua himself, the leader, begins to build it. Now, this is my own just personal thoughts, but if I was Joshua and I'm building this memorial, 12 big old heavy stones and rocks, in my mind, I'm thinking about the last 40 years. Because Joshua was there when they crossed the Red Sea. And he was there with the 10 Commandments and manna and 40 years of wandering. They've crossed the moment. And as he's building it, he's got to realize this is a 40-year promise that God has just made good on. And he's up in age, and so he's thinking about that stuff, and yeah, I'm sure sentimental, and I wonder if tears are flowing down through his eyes of gratitude and joy and just understanding that God has brought him out of Egypt, across the Red Sea 40 years later. Now he's in the promised land, and he begins to build this memorial. When God changes your life, when something amazing happens, and it's only because of God. And a life change story is I was, then God, now I am. When you go from I was to now I am, and God's in the middle, that is an amazing thing. Don't just let it kind of happen and become a distant memory. Do something memorable in order to remember that moment. And here's why that is so important. Continue on. Look at verse 21. It says, then Joshua said to the Israelites, in the future, your children will ask, what do these stones mean? Then you can tell them, this is where the Israelites crossed the Jordan on dry ground. Verse 23. For the Lord your God dried up the river right before your eyes, and he kept it dry until you were all across, just as he did at the Red Sea when he dried it up until we had all crossed over. He did this so that all the nations of the earth might know that the Lord's hand is powerful, and so that you might fear the Lord your God forever. He doesn't just go back to the Jordan River. He goes all the way back to the Red Sea 40 years earlier. And so here's why it is so important that you do something memorable. That you have something in your life to remember that life change moment. And it's so that you and I, so that we can see how far we've come because of all that God has done in your life and in mine. You and I, we can see how far we have come in our journey because of all that God has done in our life. Because of those moments, because of his grace, because of his second chances, because of those things, that timing that worked out, we look back and we see all that he has done. But what happens is we forget that because we're so focused on the next thing. We're so focused on the next battle of Jericho. We're so focused on the next tense relationship, on the next financial hurdle. We're so focused on going, Lord, I need another life change. Lord, I need another miracle. And yes, that's a good thing, but don't forget where you've come from. And so as Joshua's building this, he would remember all the way back to the Red Sea and going, my goodness, 40 years, God has been so faithful. And you do those memorable things in order to remember the life change so you can look back and go, I'm so grateful for God's goodness and faithfulness. But it's got to be something personally that you do, not of somebody else. Like Joshua didn't have the 12 dudes build a stone memorial and go, oh, that's great. Joshua built it personally himself so he could look back and see, man, look at all that God has done. Now, a couple of months ago, you don't know this, but I was up here on stage at both services preaching, and I was scared to death. Like acid turning in my stomach, nearly threw up before service, just sick to my stomach, and you had no clue. Like, that's just the art of faking it. Anyway, you don't know, because let me tell you why. Because I wake up Sunday morning a couple of months ago, go get ready, about to walk out the door, get here at my usual time. And in my spot in my house, I always keep my wallet, my ring, my watch, and my car keys on all this one spot. And I grab my wallet and my watch and my car keys, and my wedding ring was nowhere to be found. And it's one of those where you just go, oh, I'm sure it's around here somewhere. Where you look for a couple of minutes and then it like escalates, you know what I'm talking about? You look for a couple more minutes and then it escalates, and like 10 minutes later, I'm turning over every furniture piece in the house. Okay, just me, whatever. All right, so I did that, could not find it, and Brianna's like, oh, it's okay, just put tie a string around it, you'll be good. I was like, you put a ring on this finger, babe. And so she's like, oh, you'll figure it out. So I'm driving here just stressed. I call Randy Angie, our executive pastor. I go, hey, Randy. He goes, yeah. I go, can I borrow your wedding ring? And he goes, yeah, why? Randy and his wife Claire have been married over 40 years, so I thought, that's a good one to borrow. And I told him, he's like, oh, yeah, you can borrow it. So I get here, and I put Randy's ring on. We have about the same size fingers. And what's interesting, it was literally identical to mine, which I thought to myself, men's fashion and wedding rings have not changed much in 40 years. Like, it's gold and it's round. Anyway, I put it on and I preach. Later that evening, my ring had rolled literally underneath the couch in the back corner, and I find it. But that whole time I'm preaching, it was a nice ring. Don't get me wrong. It meant nothing to me. Nothing. I mean, I'm sure it means a lot to Randy and Claire Ann and their 40 years, but for me, it meant nothing. It's good for Randy. It was his, but it wasn't mine. It didn't remind me of that day when I put this ring on, put it on there, and I look at it and go, and that's the day that Brianna married the biggest nerd she's ever met. Like, it's proof that God still does miracles. Like, it really is. That moment where it's mine now, it's not worth that much. Brianna got the way better end of the deal on rings, just FYI. But it's mine. It's not worth much, but it's priceless. And the reason why is because, man, it reminds me of what happened on that day, and to see how far we've come in our marriage. Do something memorable in your life, in your marriage, with your kids and your finances, going, on this day, on this moment, God did something unbelievable. And it's only because of him that I'm moving in this direction, or this was healed, or this was answered. And I see his goodness and his grace and his faithfulness. Do something memorable so you see all that God has done in your life. And then the next reason I want you to look at go back to verse 21. It says, then Joshua said to the Israelites, in the future, your children will ask, what do these stones mean? Verse 22. Then you can tell them this is where the Israelites crossed the Jordan on dry ground. See, we do this so we can see how far we've come. We also do this so they can see how far we've come, because we tell them of all God has done. That thing you're doing, that memorable thing, is not just for you, but it's for them. It's for your kids, it's for your grandkids, it's for your neighbors, it's for your coworkers, it's for your classmates, it's for those random people that when they see that memorable thing and they ask you about it, now you have a story to tell. Now that moment does not just stop there in that moment. Now that moment is exponentially grown because of now the stories that you get to tell and that you get to share. This is why you do something memorable. And he tells Joshua, you build these stone memorials, and so in the future, when your children and your grandchildren ask you, you get to tell them about the power of God, about the faithfulness of God. For them, for Joshua, it started at the Red Sea for 40 years, and there in that moment, kids and grandkids can look back and go, what do these 12 rocks mean? Let me tell you about God's goodness. Let me tell you about his faithfulness. Let me tell you how he saved our marriage. Let me tell you how he healed my addiction. Let me tell you how he got my finances back in order and now we're debt-free. Let me tell you how he brought my family back together closer than ever. Let me tell you about God and what he's done in my life. It's the beautiful thing about a life-change story is, yes, it's your story, but it's also your story to share. There's just something powerful about when a story is passed down from generation to generation, to look back, and it's not just a random object, it's not just a random item or memory, it's a story. Let me tell you what has happened to your kids, to your grandkids, to your coworkers, to your neighbors. Let me tell you about God's faithfulness. That is why we do something memorable in order to remember the life change. Growing up, I had this little bed, a little twin bed that was given to me by my grandmother. It belonged originally to my uncle, who I never met. He passed away at a young age before I was born. And then it went from my uncle to my dad, who was his younger brother. And then from my dad, it was there at my grandmother's house and was given to me when I was little. And so it arrived at our house and we set it up, and I had been in this bed for about a week or so. And I was noticing something on the headboard. On the edge, there was scratched HFE, and then underneath that, RCE. I thought, well, that's strange. And so I asked my dad, I said, hey, what are these letters? What do they mean? And as soon as he sees it, it was almost one of those deals where he had forgotten about it, but now his mind races back 25, 30 years later. And he started smiling. He goes, oh, let me tell you about your uncle. He goes, your uncle liked to put his name on everything. He goes, he put it on his baseball gloves, on his hats, on his clothes, and he goes, even on the bed. HFE, he says, stands for Harry Floyd Emmitt. That was my uncle's name. And I go, what's the next one? He goes, well, I inherited it from my brother. He goes, so I put RCE, Robert Christopher Emmitt. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so my dad leaves. Because I thought to myself, I can't get in trouble. Like, that was my first thought. And so that night, right underneath that was a CRE. And I thought that there was that moment where it wasn't just random initials scratched into it. It was a story. Man, it was lineage. It was heritage. For me, it was just a really cool thing to hear about my uncle that I never met, and then my dad as a kid, and now on to me. Now, hear me carefully. If you're a kid in this room, do not carve your initial into your mom's dining room table. I don't want an email. Let me tell you what Junior did because of you, Chris. So, but it's the memories. It's what gets passed on. There's something powerful about that, whether it's, it's traditions, it's things that happen. Why do we do this? Because let me tell you what our family was like before God got involved. Let me tell you what our finances were like before God became the center of it. Let me tell you, we were in and out of the hospital, and then God healed us miraculously, and now here's where we're at. So this is why we do it. This is why we have these memories. These are why we do these things. This is why we have something memorable, so we don't forget the goodness and faithfulness of God, and so that we can share it with others. And so what do you do with all of this? I mean, it's a cool story. The rocks and carrying a rock 5 miles is certainly a memorable thing, but what do you do with this? When you begin to think about your life and you think about the life-change things that have happened, restored marriages, overcoming addictions, this week, just do this. Set a reminder that you won't forget and that you can share. Set a reminder that you won't forget and that you can share. Do something in your life that it will be such a powerful, profound reminder that you will remember and that you can share forever. And it's a plaque, it's a picture, it's a certificate, it's a commemorative Bible. Something cool this week, I was talking with some people about, we have an awesome ministry here called Celebrate Recovery. And it's a really great group of people that meet on Tuesday nights. And Eric and Alexa Gray lead it. And I was just talking with them. And if you're familiar with 12 steps or anything like this, coins are really powerful things, sobriety coins. And they had some in the back they gave to me. It was like a 3-year, and there's a 18 months, and a 5-year, and a 1 year. But the cool one that I really like is this blue one. It's this blue one. Because on the back it says, the journey begins. The journey begins. And on the front it says, my grace is enough for you. And Eric says, any person that walks in to Celebrate Recovery for the first time, or maybe there's a relapse and they're trying to get their life back in order, they get a blue chip. They get a blue chip. And for them, it's going, my journey starts now. And it's for them, it's that reminder. And if you've ever been around anybody that has these coins, sobriety coins, they love to tell you about them because it's such a powerful story. And they love to go, man, here's where I was at, and here's how God helped me walk through this. But these blue coins, it's the blue chips that says the journey begins. Now, you need to understand something. Eric and Alexa, they're volunteers. They've got their own lives and their own jobs, but every Tuesday night they volunteer, and nearly 100 people show up every Tuesday night and go through Celebrate Recovery. And they just celebrated the 1-year anniversary 2 or 3 weeks ago, meeting here. And in the past year, they have given out 450 of these blue chips. 450 as the journey begins. 450 life-change stories. They're going, you know what? Here's something to remember. This is not just something for you, but it's something to share. Do something memorable in your life. It's a t-shirt. It's writing it down in a journal. It's taking a picture of it. It's putting up wall art in your house. You know, it just says, man, this is different. This house is different. If your marriage was on the rocks and, man, you saw a counselor or something, man, buy new wedding rings. And go, man, it's different. It's better. God is now the center of our marriage. Maybe it's a location. Maybe it's on a road. Maybe it's a church. Maybe it's a conference center. Maybe it's an old house. But you're going, this is where God got a hold of my life. This is a powerful reminder that reminds me and that I tell others about. Maybe it's a sunrise or sunset. Maybe it's a lake or a creek or a mountain where you go, this is my reminder. Every time I see that mountain, every time I see a sunrise or sunset, it is a reminder of God's goodness and faithfulness in my life, and now I get to share with others. Let me tell you why this sunset is so beautiful to me. Yes, it's a pretty sunset, but let me tell you what it means to me personally. But do something memorable in your life that when you see it, you're reminded. When others see it, they ask about it. And I had this idea this week. I threw this idea just randomly out at 9:30. It was received, so-so. It almost did make the cut at 11, but I thought, you know what? You're cool. So we'll see if you're cool. Anyway, so here's my idea. If you're going, well, I need something, to do. I just randomly thought, why don't you put a gigantic boulder on your front porch? Man, all right. No. But here's, 9:30 like it is cooler. All right, so anyway, why a gigantic boulder? Because it's so weird. That's why. It's so out of the blue. If a gigantic boulder's on somebody's front porch, you're probably going to ask, why do you have a big rock on your front porch? Let me tell you how God restored my marriage. Let me tell you, man, we are now debt-free because we've been operating according to the way God wants us to run our finances. Let me tell you about my family. Let me tell you about this addiction overcome. Why is the gigantic rock on your front porch? So you would ask? Just so you would ask. It's a reminder to me, and it's a reason for me to share. But do something. Maybe don't put a boulder in your front, but do something. Figure it out where you go, man, this is so powerful. It's a reminder. It's a picture hanging up in your office. It's social. You're posting on social media. Use social media for some good. Put it out there. Go, let me tell you how God has restored me, how God has healed me. It is such a powerful reminder, and I want to share it with the world. That was the reason for the rock, for the 12 rocks. It wasn't just, hey, let's put some rocks on the shore. It's like, no. Carry it 5 miles. And then Joshua goes, I'll build it one by one by one. And it's a reminder of God's goodness and faithfulness all the way back from the Red Sea, Exodus from Egypt, all the way till now, and it'll be faithful to us all the way to the future. I'll finish with this. And it is a reminder of the greatest life change the world has ever known. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, in verse 24, Paul is writing and is recounting the Last Supper. And verse 24, it says, then he broke it in pieces and said, this is my body which is given for you. Do this to remember me. And in the same way, he took the cup of wine after supper, saying, this cup is a new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood. Do this to remember me as often as you drink it. Then Paul would say, for every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, you are announcing the Lord's death until he comes again. The night before he was crucified, Jesus gathered his disciples on Passover, which was a reminder of what had happened 40 years before this rock was placed. It was a reminder of God's delivering them out of Egypt. So they're gathering around, and Jesus goes, hey, I'll give you something new. What do you mean new? Well, you're still going to gather, and you're to break bread and going to pass the cup, but it's going to mean something different. Well, what's it going to mean? Well, this bread's going to represent my body, and the cup, it's going to represent my blood. Because tomorrow, and then days after that, it's all going to make sense. But what's going to happen over the next few days, it's the greatest life change the world has ever known. He's telling his disciples, I want you to remember it. I want you to remember it. And then he goes, Paul would say, we're doing this to announce in the Lord's death until he comes again. So you gather to remember, and then you announce, and you share, and you talk about the future and the hope. And so after this, for 2,000 years, Christians all around the globe have gathered together to remember and to talk about. To remember what happened on the cross with the bread and the cup, and to talk about the goodness and faithfulness and looking forward to a glorious hope and future in heaven. And I can't think of a better way to finish our series than to celebrate communion and to remember. To remember as believers what Jesus did on the cross, and to look forward to the glorious hope and future in heaven. The little bread and juice is the same principle and purpose for the 12 rocks. It was a reminder. And he goes, this is now a reminder for you and for me. Let me pray and we'll celebrate it together. Jesus, thank you for who you are. Thank you for your goodness and your faithfulness. I thank you for the cross. Thank you for the empty tomb. Father, forgive us for taking things for granted or failing to remember. Jesus, my prayer today is that we as believers here in this room or watching online would stop and remember who you are. If you're a Christian, you can just kind of keep your heads bowed and eyes closed and just begin to think about the things of Jesus and what the cross means to you. And if you're here or watching online and you're not a Christian, that is the first and most important life change that you need. You need a relationship with Jesus Christ. Through him and him alone, you will find everything that you could ever want and need in life. But it begins by placing your faith in Jesus, what happened on the cross, and the fact that God raised him from the dead. If you've never done that, you can do that right now. The Bible is just very, very clear on how you do that. It says all who call upon the Lord will be saved. If you're ready to do that, you can just say something like this, mean it from your heart. Just say, today, Jesus, I trust you for my salvation. Forgive me for my sins. Fill me with your Spirit. And Lord, help me to live for you every day from this day forward. Thank you for my salvation. Father, I pray for all of us. Lord, my prayer is that we would not let communion just become another thing that we do every now and then at church, but it would be a powerful, stark reminder in our lives of the mercy and forgiveness and grace that was shown on the cross 2,000 years ago. We love you, Jesus, and ask these things in your name. Amen.